Our primary purpose is to entertain, and where we can entertain responsibly, obviously, we try to do that. We try to have a positive impact on the world.
The buzz surrounding Disney's Snow White reboot was once electric, promising a grand tribute to the studio's earliest fairy tale magic. Many longtime fans believed they'd get a chance to relive childhood wonder in a fresh, modernized format. But that optimism vanished almost overnight.
I have a clip of it.
Oh, okay, great.
Her being a retard.
Okay.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White.
That
is
not going to be saved by
You
the
wrote
prince.
it?
It's not going to be saved by the prince.
Replaced by heated online debates and widespread backlash. The central figure at the storm's core? Rachel Zegler, an actress who had skyrocketed from relative obscurity to Disney's princess spotlight, only to find herself juggling controversies, intense public scrutiny, and strained relationships with the very studio that hired her. Few people realized how quickly things spiraled.
There was an in-depth piece, like a behind-the-scenes piece, talking about how they've been in a full meltdown about this girl for a couple of years now.
When the first casting rumors surfaced, plenty of viewers felt uncertain about Disney's decision. Snow White, after all, was the bedrock of their animated legacy. Bringing it to live action was already a delicate undertaking, and expectations ran impossibly high. But for a brief moment, the curiosity overshadowed any doubts.
Original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Fans speculated about how the story might expand. Would there be new subplots? Would the dwarfs be reimagined? Could this retelling recapture that sense of timeless wonder? Then came the interviews and social media posts that changed everything. Rachel, feeling confident and seemingly eager to voice her perspective, began commenting on aspects of the classic story. She described certain plot points as outdated and hinted that Snow White's traditional narrative was overdue for a drastic shift. To some, these remarks sounded empowering, a breath of modern sensibility in a centuries-old tale.
Our rights are on the line, folks.
Bitch! The right to buy Cosby sweaters?
Come on.
That's the face
Go
of a
vote blue.
serial.
But to others, they felt like an outright dismissal of a beloved classic. The conversation went from mild concern to high alert. In a matter of days, supporters of the original film labeled Rachel's takes as disrespectful, while progressive fans praised her willingness to speak up. But that wasn't the whole story.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business.
Noted.
Thanks.
Soon, critics and audiences discovered that Rachel's commentary extended beyond general opinions about the film industry. Her social media revealed posts of a far more controversial nature, ones that touched upon fraught political matters. She made statements about international conflicts that quickly sparked furious debates across the internet. Suddenly, this wasn't just about whether Snow White should remain a classic fairy tale or get an update for modern audiences. It became a polarizing standoff between Rachel and entire swaths of the viewing public. The tone of conversations online grew more and more heated, with claims that she was alienating fans before the movie even had a chance to shine. Word also spread that Disney executives weren't exactly pleased by these developments. Internally, the studio had pumped an enormous budget into the project, planning an extensive marketing campaign, one that needed a positive public face to succeed.
But the primary suffering is being sent in by my company to watch a children's movie as a single man, like 2 p.m. on a Thursday. That was the first part that was a little bit weird, but I was basically the only person in the theater.
Yet each new tweet or interview seemed to ignite another round of controversy. At first, the studio attempted to ride it out, hoping the negative chatter might dissipate. But as the weeks rolled on, frustration bubbled to the surface. Rumors emerged that phone calls and urgent meetings happened behind closed doors, urging Rachel to tone it down and focus on the film. Supporters of the actress argued that a global powerhouse like Disney should stand behind their talent and allow free expression. Meanwhile, critics found themselves more motivated than ever to stage boycotts, tweet out petitions, and slam the studio's choices. To many, it felt like the relationship between Rachel and Disney was edging toward collapse before the film's marketing campaign had even reached full swing. Then came an avalanche of additional reports suggesting she had clashed with producers and other executives on earlier projects, including West Side Story.
You don't particularly see people who, look like me or are me playing roles like that. So it was definitely, when it got announced,
White!
He wasn't a stalker, by the way.
thing that was like,
A pattern of tension started emerging, painting a picture of someone unafraid to challenge big studios, perhaps too forcefully in some eyes. Various insiders claimed Rachel had refused to keep quiet about any perceived injustices.
trending on Twitter for days because all of the people were angry.
The people that we need to love into awareness.
Whether they involved casting decisions, script rewrites, or political discourse. Detractors painted her as a troublemaker, while her defenders saw her as a champion of progressive values. The drama only intensified when certain conservative groups discovered her candid social media posts and lashed out. They called her comments inflammatory, anti-American, or simply too woke for a company that traditionally marketed to families across the ideological spectrum. Hashtags urging fans to boycott Snow White began trending, and the film's trailer racked up more negative buzz than Disney had seen in ages. Suddenly, what might have been a straightforward promotional period turned into a frantic game of damage control.
No, the people who you need to entertain, the people who you need to serve, the people who pay your salary.
The entire production team worried about whether mainstream audiences would be scared away by the headlines overshadowing the movie's release. But the chaos behind the scenes may have been even more dramatic. Producers and top-level executives, facing urgent calls from Disney leadership, allegedly confronted Rachel about her public image. The studio had no interest in fueling political fights or alienating swathes of paying customers. Even so, each attempt at reining in the controversy seemed to backfire. The star was not one to mince words or apologize for her personal convictions. Insiders insisted there was a frantic scramble to curb any more outbursts, going so far as to involve a crisis management team to guide her social media activity. Yet, the damage was done.
It's not your job. Your job is to entertain. You are paid to entertain.
This movie was like you took the original Snow White and just put everything through this filter of liberalism.
Every time Rachel posted something vaguely political or sensitive, watchers screenshotted it within seconds, feeding a continuous cycle of outrage. Meanwhile, the financial implications of this unfolding drama spooked many within the company. Early projections for Snow White's box office shifted from optimistic to grim. Industry commentators whispered about the film struggling to break even. Media analysts dissected the ballooning budget and the marketing fiasco. Some pegged the blame squarely on Rachel's shoulders, referencing the intense negativity swirling around her remarks. Others pointed to deeper issues, like the shaky pattern of Disney's live-action remakes and the public's fatigue with reimagining animated classics. Whatever the causes, the numbers looked dire. Then came the moment that truly rattled Disney. Internal forecasts suggested the film might lose upward of $200 million. That staggering figure was enough to give any executive nightmares.
They replaced the prince with a common criminal. So there is a prince-like figure, but he's no longer a prince, he's a criminal.
To make matters worse, rumors started to circulate that Disney had decided to shelve, or at least postpone, another planned adaptation, Tangled, because they didn't want to risk another financial fiasco. The entire live-action princess pipeline was suddenly thrown into question. Many employees and fans asked themselves, how had a single project gone this far off the rails? Online, the conversation expanded beyond Snow White alone. People began delving into Rachel's background, her upbringing, her activism, her statements on representation in Hollywood. It came to light that she had felt slighted while auditioning for West Side Story, allegedly needing to prove her heritage to a room full of skeptical executives. In that sense, her frustration with the system had been brewing for years, spurred by repeated experiences she perceived as biased or dismissive. For some observers, this context explained why Rachel pushed back so hard on what she saw as outdated norms.
And now she's trying to reinvent herself because there's been so much blowback, and you can only imagine the studio calls about this woman behind the scene, like, oh my God, we're $242 million in, and our lead actress hates our film, our actors, our storyline.
Yet for every person who championed her defiance, another shouted that she was too abrasive, too combative, and too quick to pick fights with the very institutions signing her paychecks. Moderates, who simply wanted a nostalgic recreation of Snow White, found themselves caught in the crossfire. They might have shared some of Rachel's modern views, yet disliked the brunt of her online rants. They were uncomfortable with how divisive the situation became. As the release date inched closer, anticipation around the film itself was overshadowed by never-ending discourse on social media. Was Snow White going to be a total flop? Or could it still find an audience among families unconcerned with behind-the-scenes drama? Audiences got their answer soon enough. When the movie debuted, it fell drastically short of the lofty box office goals Disney had set.
Real time. We are now at a 1 out of 10 on IMDb for the new Snow White, and it couldn't happen to a better person.
Critics panned it for multiple reasons. Some found the updated storyline lacking the heart of the original, while others believed the controversy overshadowed any merit the film might have had. Rachel's performance itself became a lightning rod for debate. Supporters said she poured genuine emotion into a fresh interpretation of the character. Harsher critics argued that her version felt hollow, overshadowed by real-world drama. Whatever the truth, the financial returns showed a steep decline, further fueling tensions between the star and the studio that had banked on her success. In the midst of all this turmoil, many watchers wondered whether the blowback was about more than Rachel's remarks. Some suspected that the fiasco simply reflected a larger weariness with live-action remakes. Others felt that the backlash was partly stoked by political factions determined to punish anyone seen as too outspoken.
Do you really want to have an actor that gets involved with your movie that constantly brings up politics and then does it even inside of the advertising and the marketing of the career?
Still others believed the entire narrative had been inflated by sensational headlines, turning every offhand comment from Rachel into a trending controversy. Whichever perspective one took, it was clear that the negativity swirling around the movie had become an unstoppable force. While fans and detractors argued online, the impact behind the scenes was immediate. When executives reviewed the final numbers, the word disaster loomed large. Internally, blame games reportedly raged. Marketing teams claimed Rachel's comments had forced them to redirect resources into damage control. Creative leads lamented that the film itself never got a fair shot, overshadowed by drama that had nothing to do with the artistry behind the camera. Meanwhile, Rachel's supporters contended that Disney's brand of sanitized PR was stifling and archaic, and that the actress was only guilty of speaking truths too raw for corporate taste. Yet as more facts emerged about how badly the studio was hemorrhaging money on Snow White, one takeaway became undeniable. Disney's tolerance for controversy was wearing thin. Insiders hinted that top brass had effectively blacklisted Rachel from future projects, even though official statements were kept vague. As the weeks passed, fewer industry professionals seemed eager to attach their name to her. Media speculation flared up over whether she might be dropped from other productions still in development. Some insisted Rachel would bounce back. They pointed out that Hollywood has a cyclical memory. Today's pariah could become tomorrow's comeback story if a surprise hit or award-winning performance captured the public's admiration. After all, the industry loves a redemption arc, but in the near term, the outlook felt bleak. Rumors suggested that phone calls from her team to major studios went unanswered. The once sparkling promise of a successful Disney princess run had turned into hushed discussions of contractual buyouts and mutual separations. Meanwhile, the general audience remained enthralled by the drama. Social media commentary was relentless, sometimes cruel, sometimes sympathetic, often conspiratorial. Topics ranged from Rachel's perceived wokeness to Disney's possible financial meltdown. Some threads insisted the fiasco was part of a broader cultural shift, hinting that big studios could no longer rely on the old ways of marketing. A more cynical contingent laughed off the entire affair, calling it a predictable outcome of slapping live-action remake onto a property that some believed should have remained untouched. A quiet part of this story was the heartbreak of cast and crew members who had poured their talent into the film. Many had treasured dreams of remaking a classic they grew up adoring. Whether or not they agreed with Rachel's politics or attitude, their disappointment was real. Among them was Martin Kleba, who voiced Grumpy, openly expressing frustration that all the historic significance of Snow White had been buried by unending controversies. The synergy and celebration that usually accompany a Disney release were conspicuously absent, replaced by a subdued screening that almost no one outside the immediate production attended. Still, People kept talking. On forums, in comment sections, and at family gatherings, questions swirled. Was Rachel too headstrong in calling out old traditions? Did Disney overreact by trying to muzzle her opinions? Or had they acted too late to protect their brand? Might the audience have eventually embraced her perspective if the rollout had been handled differently? Or was the real issue that audiences felt oversaturated by constant reboots and reimaginings? As days turned into weeks, the box office receipts flattened, confirming that Snow White wouldn't meet Disney's break-even threshold. That outcome had a ripple effect on other potential remakes, as executives frantically reassessed whether the live-action formula still had traction. While some were quick to blame Rachel, others pointed to how certain reboots, like Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast, had thrived under simpler circumstances, free from intense political undertones. The difference now was that social media controversies moved at lightning speed, magnifying every minor statement into a full-scale public fiasco. In that environment, a single stray comment could unravel months of planning. Despite all of this, Rachel didn't vanish from headlines. Occasionally, she released statements defending her past posts, suggesting that she wouldn't compromise her convictions just to suit corporate agendas. Other times, she remained silent, fueling speculation that maybe Disney's internal crisis team had finally succeeded in shutting down her social media presence. Whenever she did speak, though, the online reaction was immediate. Supporters called her brave. Critics doubled down on accusations of arrogance and condescension toward the fairy tale legacy she was hired to uphold. Meanwhile, the tangential fallout also became clearer. The rumored Tangled live-action adaptation was reportedly shelved. That news infuriated some fans who adored the animated Rapunzel and had hoped for a similar big-screen treatment. Others expressed relief that Tangled would be spared the kind of controversy plaguing Snow White. They wondered if Disney might course-correct by hiring less polarizing talent or by handling the marketing with more sensitivity. However it shook out, the disappointment was palpable, and those behind the scenes realized just how big a gamble these remakes could be when public perception turned negative. West Side Story enthusiasts followed the uproar closely, recalling anecdotes of Rachel clashing with studio higher-ups on that film as well. While she had received critical acclaim for her performance, there were hints that friction with decision-makers had existed from the start. In that sense, the conflict with Disney seemed to follow a pattern. Rachel stepping on institutional toes while believing she was righting wrongs, and executives feeling cornered by her public outbursts. If it had been a single remark or isolated incident, maybe the situation could have resolved quietly. But these repeated flashpoints only intensified, culminating in a full-blown standoff that dwarfed whatever magic Snow White was supposed to deliver. In online spaces, the name Rachel Zgler became a lightning rod. She symbolized, for some, the new generation of artists demanding progress and representation. For others, she stood as a cautionary tale of what happens when an actor's personal crusades overshadow the film they were hired to promote. Debates raged about whether studios should adapt older stories in ways that reflect modern sensibilities. Yet an undercurrent always turned the discussion back to Rachel's refusal to filter her commentary. Many felt that the situation illustrated a new reality. Big Hollywood productions, once able to control every narrative, now wrestle with highly visible, outspoken stars who can shape public opinion with a few keystrokes. As the dust finally began to settle, the general consensus became that Rachel's Hollywood trajectory was in serious question. Some industry insiders maintained that a talented performer could eventually stage a comeback. Others doubted major studios would risk the potential controversies that might follow, especially considering the steep losses Snow White incurred. Talk of potential recastings or direct-to-streaming releases for future projects even sprang up in rumor mills. None of it felt definite, though, simply the speculation that runs rampant when a star's name becomes entangled in such a high-profile disappointment. By this point, the overarching question wasn't just about box office tallies or poor marketing decisions. It was about legacy. Snow White was Walt Disney's first feature-length animation, a film that, for decades, represented the birth of a storytelling empire. Now its live-action counterpart would be remembered less as a heartfelt reimagining and more as a prime example of controversy overshadowing content. Fans who once dreamed of seeing a modern Snow White that recaptured the charm of the original found themselves wading through discussions of political commentary, cultural conflicts, and the perils of an actress waging social media battles against her own studio's expectations. The spectacle surrounding Rachel Zegler and Disney's ill-fated Snow White became a flashpoint for how quickly modern Hollywood can turn on a rising star, and how easily a long-celebrated institution can stumble when it misreads the public mood. Whether one felt that the blame should be placed on executives who tried to muzzle artistic freedom, on fans too eager to pounce on any perceived misstep, or on Rachel herself for stirring the pot, the end result was the same: a box office letdown accompanied by damaged reputations on all sides. Meanwhile, the internet continued to churn out theories, takedowns, and memes, ensuring that the memory of this debacle would linger. In the end, the film served as a cautionary tale for the industry and its audiences alike. Studios learned that no amount of marketing spend can overcome unrelenting controversy, and that even the most iconic brands can falter in the face of public resistance. Viewers realized that social media and political commentary have the power to reshape the narrative around a movie before it even hits theaters. And Rachel? She stands as a complex figure, admired by some for her conviction, yet seen by others as an emblem of unchecked hubris. What remains now are lingering questions about whether Snow White will go down as a footnote in Disney's otherwise impressive library of adaptations, or if it will transform how the studio navigates reboots in the future. Will we see fewer attempts at tinkering with beloved classics? Will future cast members feel pressured to maintain a squeaky clean online presence? Perhaps the greatest uncertainty revolves around Rachel's next move. Will she find an opportunity to redeem herself with a project that resonates beyond the controversies? Or will the industry, already skittish about negative publicity, quietly close its doors on her? Time will tell. In the meantime, fans of classic Disney movies are left to reflect on what once seemed like a guaranteed crowd pleaser. Instead of celebrating a nostalgic reunion with a beloved princess, they witnessed an uproar that overshadowed every aspect of the production. The saga may continue to unfold in headlines and social media debates, and Rachel's personal story in Hollywood remains an open-ended puzzle. One thing is certain: the echoes of this fiasco won't fade anytime soon. People will revisit it as an example of how quickly fortunes can change when controversy spreads like wildfire. Whether you believe Rachel's boldness was justified or misguided, she undoubtedly altered the conversation around old Disney tales, and possibly forced the entertainment world to grapple with new questions about activism, corporate agendas, and the fragile equilibrium between art and commerce. So, was this all about wokeness, personal grudges, or something deeper? That's for each viewer to decide. What's beyond doubt is that the legacy of Disney's first animated masterpiece now bears a live-action chapter steeped in tension, political drama, and hefty financial losses. And Rachel Zgler, once hailed as the fresh face of a timeless princess, stands at a professional crossroads, her future no less uncertain than the fate of any other live-action reimagining still waiting on a studio's green light. It's the kind of ending that leaves us with more questions than answers. And maybe that's the biggest twist of all.